Welcome, everyone. We are here for the bestseller secrets. If you are an author or thinking about becoming an author and you would like to be successful, well, you are absolutely in the right place. I am here. I've got my special guest with us as well, Mick Peterson. We're going to hear from him in a little bit. And we're going to give you some guidance on what it truly takes today in this day and age to be a successful author. And I really believe that where we are today at this time is like the gold rush days back in the 1800s, where there was such a great opportunity to really claim your stake, claim your share of something that was available to pretty much anyone who was willing to do the work to get it. And I think there's a clue in that comment that you must be willing to do the work to get that. Looks like Carolyn has joined us as well. Welcome, Carolyn. Happy to have you here. Thank you so much. We're gonna come back to you, Carolyn, a little bit. If you don't mind maybe muting your line just for a little bit, I'm going to do a little introduction and then we're going to bring you in. We're also going to bring Mick in as well. So I was just welcoming everyone. We've got people that are joining us. And as usual, it's from all over the world. We're happy to have you guys here. Let us know where you're from, and perhaps if you are an author already or you're planning to be an author. And while you're doing that, think of any questions that you would just love to have answered as far as being an author, and I will be sure to get to them. So before we get to that, I want to share with you a little bit about what this opportunity is and what you need to know to proceed, and give you some suggestions and some steps as far as what you could do, or I would suggest that you do as well. And I'm also going to give you an invitation if you're interested in really, you're serious about this commitment of being a successful author, then I'll share with you how we could work together a little bit later in our call. So you may or may not know who I am. My name is Peggy McColl, obviously, and I am a New York Times bestselling author. And I'm the author of 13 books so far. My books are translated into 37 languages, and that's as far as I know. It could be more, but I'm just not aware of it. As a matter of fact, not that long ago, I had someone send me a copy of my book that was being sold in Africa. And I don't remember in Africa, and I know it's a big continent and everything, but my book had been basically copied, and a publisher who did not have the rights to my book had taken the content of my book, and they had put their publishing information on it, still left the title of the book, the content of the book, and my name of the book. So basically it's illegal what they did, but they published my book and brought it out and started selling it. And one of my colleagues happened to see it in a bookstore or gift store. It was a gift store somewhere in Africa, and they bought a copy. And they knew that I had not sold the rights to this publishing house. I don't know how they knew that, but they knew that. And they bought a copy and they sent it to me. So I was pretty excited about that, because I once heard that plagiarism is the highest form of flattery. And so they definitely plagiarized my book. They took the content and published it. So, well, whatever it is, it's good. It's out there in the world. And it's probably a challenging thing to even share that story with you. It's not that it's going to happen, but it did happen. And of course it happened with one of my books at a 13, no big deal. You do protect your work, of course, when you do publish it, and it's very easy to do, but you just never know where your books are going to land. You never know who you're going to impact. You never know how your book's going to influence someone. And what you really don't have any idea about is how it could personally impact you. Because writing a book, yes, authors write the books because they want to make a difference. They want to contribute to somebody else's life, whether they're writing fiction or nonfiction. But at the end of the day, it's such an incredible growth experience, such a rewarding experience to do that. And I know when I wrote my first book, and I have a copy of it right here, it's a book that I've taken out of print now, but it's a book called On Being the Creator of Your Destiny. And it's a hardcover edition. And I self-published this book and I brought it up to the marketplace. But when I did, if we just go back in time for a moment, I really knew nothing about the book industry, and I didn't know anything about writing. And I had made a decision. And there's something in the power of making a decision. And it's like when you make a decision, everything that's requisite for the fulfillment of that decision, or the desire, or the outcome that you set for yourself, will be attracted to you. And fortunately, I had read hundreds of books, so I had a good idea of the style of books. And I remember one time hearing that good writers are good readers. Good writers are good readers. And I don't really consider myself a great writer. I think I'm an okay writer. I can speak the language, English, obviously. You're listening to me right now. But the good news for you is if you don't consider yourself to be a good writer, that's okay, because we've been blessed with editors. And editors, that's their profession, is to edit content, edit books, edit material. And so that's what I did. I wrote my book. I followed a very simple plan that I set for myself. I got on with the work, and then I decided to self-publish the book. But if you know anything about my story, after I'd self-published the book, I wasn't getting any sales. I wasn't getting any traction. So I was actually operating from a place called ignorance. And ignorance is not a blissful place to be, even though there's a statement that says ignorance is bliss. It's not bliss. It's anything but bliss. It was the opposite of bliss. And so I realized that I really did need to learn how to be successful as an author, because it was a brand new industry, something that I wasn't familiar with and had no idea about. So I decided I would learn and invest. And that's exactly what I did. So I found people that knew how to get results, and I studied and I learned from them. I invested, and I invested in myself. Really, that's where I invested. I may have bought programs and attended events, etc., but it was really the investment in myself. And I'm so glad I did, because there is no looking back from that day that I self-published and released this first book. And so once I learned how to market, I ended up writing a second book and a third book. And here's the second book that I wrote. It's called 8 Proven Secrets to Smart Success. And I released that probably within about 8 months of launching the first book. And then within 3 months of launching the second book, I launched a third book called On Being a Dog with a Bone, which I also self-published. So these 3 books are books that I self-published originally and sold thousands and thousands of copies online, which led to creating programs and offerings and just continuing to serve the world, doing work that I love, and growing a very successful business, being a successful author. And this book here, On Being a Dog with a Bone, I actually ended up selling the rights to this book to Hay House as a publisher, and Hay House bought the rights to this book and released it. We didn't really change it. They may have done an edit and released it in a hardcover format a few years later, where they bought the rights, in other words, paid me in advance to do so. And then from there, it went to my fourth book, which is Your Destiny Switch. This one was a New York Times bestseller, and of course, several books following that. But I'll talk a little bit more about that, and I'll give you some more guidelines into what makes an author a success, because I want to bring on my guests. We've got a couple people here who have very kindly joined us today. And they're here because they've experienced success. They've invested in themselves. They have the most wonderful attitudes. I love them. And I'm very, very proud of the accomplishments that they've achieved in their lives as a result of writing their books. So I'm going to first bring on Carolyn. Ladies first, if you don't mind, Mick. And I knew he wouldn't. So Carolyn, if you don't mind unmuting your line for a moment, I'm just going to do a plug for your book right here, right now. Carolyn wrote this wonderful book, which she made a bestseller. It's called Split Second Success. And the subtitle for this book is Timeless Solution for Abiding Peace and Unbounded Joy. And I wrote the foreword for this book, and I've been asked to write the foreword for many books, but I don't accept all invitations because it is a big request, of course, and you have to resonate with this book. But I was so blown away with the content of what Carolyn included in her book, Split Second Success. I love the title. And I absolutely highly recommend anyone that's watching this right here, right now, or watching the recording, because we are recording it, make sure you get yourself a copy of this book. One of the nice things about this book is that, well, I know the author, and I know this author has a tremendous understanding of all these materials. I was pretty much blown away from the moment I met Carolyn and we got to know each other and spent some time together. But this book is like only 60 pages in length. And that's one of the things I love about it, is that excuse me, it's short, it's to the point, it's filled with lots of great wisdom. So Carolyn, if you don't mind sharing with everyone, what inspired you to write the book?
So we first met in 2016 in October, the paradigm shift. And as Bob was talking on stage, saying that you have a story to tell and everything, I gave you my business card. And that was it. You just disappeared and I disappeared. And then I was in the inner circle. We had a meeting once. I bought one of your programs, How to Write a Book. And I don't remember what the exact title of the program was, but I didn't do much with it, right? I knew it was nice. I read through it. I was like, okay, one day I'll read a book. So that dream kind of got parked. But when I hired you as my mentor last year, we're just talking about that today. It's a year, because it's going to be a year in a few days since we started working together. And you had so much belief in me. You kept encouraging me. I told you what I wanted. You kind of made my vision become on paper and everything. So that was very exciting. But one day I was sitting on my couch wondering, what would I do different to add value and to make sure I can spread this message as wide as I can and as fast as I can in a very reasonable cost. And I was reading your book, The Millionaire Author, because you gave it to me when I came to your house for my one-day seminar with you. And I just sat there and I couldn't sleep. I remember calling you the next day and saying, hey, I'm going to write a book. She's like, okay, what's the title? When are you going to release it? I'm like, oh, that's the next step. The thing is, I had to go back to your program and figure out how to do it. And to be honest with you, it was a very simple step-by-step program that I went through, of course, with your support in some of the things that I didn't understand. But the thing that inspired me to write a book was really to get the message out. To get the message out to people that you have the power within you and you can do anything and be anything you want to be. And as you say, the book has that message and also has like simple disciplines that you can have or you can create within your daily practice to be able to be successful.
No, that's awesome. I love that. I love that you followed through. You know, as I'm listening to Carolyn, I want everyone who's watching this to really think about this. And I've seen this with a lot of different authors. You know, Carolyn took this step. You know, she moved forward. She made a decision. She decided to write her book. And I know in my own case, when I had decided to write a book, I was feeling, you know, a little bit of insecurity as far as who wants to read what I have to say, right? And I've noticed that with a lot of authors is that many authors, even the most successful authors, have had that thought of who wants to read what I have to say. And did you have that? Was that something that you had to deal with, Carolyn?
It was there for a moment because I first shared and I said to Chelsea, oh, you know, I'm going to write a book. Chelsea's my daughter. And she's like, really? And then for a moment there, you know, the voices start coming. Who's going to read your book? Who made you an author? But what was helpful was I was already in the program with you and you've already really taught us these things about, you know, training your mind and how you speak to yourself, what you confess, the power of the words. So I had a way to interact, you know, like to disrupt that pattern. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So it did come. And when finally the book came, I thought I was going to jump for J, but I was scared. I was scared to talk. Hey, I wrote a book. But once I told people, they were so amazed. It puts in a different group because people are like, wow, you wrote a book? I'm like, oh, there's a question mark there. So it was exciting.
I love that you said that because that's one of the tremendous benefits of writing a book is the response from other people. There's like an instant understanding or believability that if you've written a book that you must know what you're talking about. It elevates your credibility when you say that you've written a book. Yes. And I really love that. I love that you shared that. Thank you for your honesty on that. When you held your baby, and I like to call our books our babies, you know, for the first time in your hands. And I want to know, or just dive a little bit deeper into what happened to you personally. Never mind the people that have been reading it and benefiting from your area of expertise and your knowledge and your wisdom, but what happened for you personally as far as growth was concerned in the experience of writing that book?
Growth-wise, the biggest thing that happened to me is like, you got to be very authentic, right? Because the book I'm writing is not fiction. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, how do I tell people this message without really putting all my laundry out there, right? So in the whole book, the hardest part was writing the introduction. And the introduction is a little bit about my painful story. And I'm sitting there day after day. I wrote the whole book, but that part was very challenging. But it allowed me to dig deep and really come out with what could people learn from my experience. So I had to twist around. But it was very humbling, was very scary, right? But when I held that book on my hand, first was a shock. I was like, wow, I got something with my name on, it's on Amazon. And then I realized, wow, now I can really share my message. Now I really need to get out there. But those mixed feelings. I was like, I have the book, I looked at it. I didn't know if I'm supposed to jump, cry, or dance, And then I was like, my friend said, do you realize what you've just done? I said, what? Your name is on a book, and it's your name, and it's also on Amazon. So it was exciting, but there was that moment of like, I did it, and I did it. So yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. Thank you, Carolyn. Yesterday I did an event in Toronto, and I had this lovely woman who attended, and she's in her 70s, and she was sharing with me that she decided it was time to write a book because she had so many stories and so many experiences, and she wanted to leave those stories for her family, for children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, and etc. And when you talk about having your name on a book, one of the wonderful things about that is it is forever. It's like your legacy that you're leaving forever, that even after we depart from this planet, that we've left something behind. It's like Wayne Dyer used to say, don't die with your music still in you. And of course, Wayne Dyer passed on from this physical earthly plane, and he's on his eternal journey. And he said those words, don't die with your music in you. And he had gone through a tremendous upbringing as well, and he's written so many books, and his name lives on. It's something that is going to be there forever. So I love that you did that. And also what you spoke to, Carolyn, I think everyone really needs to understand, especially as you said, Carolyn, you're not writing fiction, you're writing nonfiction, and you're sharing about your own self, about your own journey. And I believe that what's really valuable to your audience, to anyone who's writing a book, anyone who's watching this or listening to this, is be willing to be vulnerable and to absolutely be authentic. I think that's really, really important. You can't pretend to be something that you're not. But yet, when you're doing the writing, you got to write it in a way that there's confidence there. I remember recently working with a new author, and she was starting to write her book, and the way that she had started to write her book, it sounded like she wasn't really sure about the message that she was writing about. And it's like, if you're not sure, your reader's definitely not going to be sure. And of course, one of the things that you want to create is you want to create a product, which is a physical book or an audiobook. I know Carolyn's working on an audiobook for Split Second Success, but you want to create something that is of value to the reader, that's something that people are going to read and just get so captivated into the material that they want to share it with others. It's like, oh my goodness, I really love it. Did you read this? It's like Carolyn and I were having a conversation earlier today, and she had mentioned a book that was released in 1975. When I went to look at it online, it said 1950. I saw something else that said 1950. But anyways, long time ago, the book was written. And yet here we are in 2018, still talking about a book, and you recommending a book that was written, many, many years ago. And that's ultimately what you want to have created. So I want to ask you another question, Carolyn. How has Split Second Success, I want you to share just some of the benefits that you've received in your life personally and then professionally. How has having the book really helped you?
Personally, it was a big milestone for me. When you look back and you're like, what have I done with my life in the last few months, in the last year? What have I achieved? What is it that I can show out for, right? For me, I can show Split Second Success very proudly, So it was a huge accomplishment. That is what it's done for me inwardly. But professionally, it's really created a lot of credibility for me. Even now, when I go to networking events, I'm like, oh, shameless plug-in, I'm a best-selling author, and you show it. But the most thing that I can say that really the book has done for me is the information I get from people who have read it. I have some friends who said, like, oh, I've really had a hard day, but I went back and looked at your book and I felt better because I read this chapter, or I felt better because I remembered this thing. So when I was writing my book, that's one thing. When someone was asking me, what is your goal? So of course, initially it's like, I want to sell 1 million copies, which is awesome, right? You make the money. But then I went back and asked myself, why am I writing the book? And it was to change somebody's life. And it has done that. It's done that for several people. And I think for me as an author, I'm like, I've arrived, because people tell me that. And at times I'm like, did you read that in my book? I need to go read it to see if I can find it, right? So I'm still like shocked, not shocked, but I really feel humbled when people say that. But it really professionally has made me feel like, okay, I have something. Even if I don't go anywhere else, this is there. It's never gonna go away. It's gonna help a lot of lives.
That's so true. And I love that you said that, you realize you felt so good about making the difference in other people's lives. It's definitely a reward when you're writing your book, even if it is fiction. We're going to go to Mick in a minute. He's going to talk about the fiction experience. But you had mentioned, Carolyn, that you're a best-selling author. And this is something that you've achieved.
Yes.
And it's something that you own forever. So tell us a little bit about that experience and what it was like for you.
Besides the fact that I didn't know. So I, of course, Hashmark Publishing had done everything and everything was on Amazon. But then, you wrote me a text on Facebook. You made a comment when I was trying to talk about my book. You say, hey, best-selling author. I'm like, excuse me. So what it's done for me, it's like I can hold, it's another title that you hold that doesn't go away. So I'm not just another author. I'm a best-selling author. So I really strongly believe that that makes a huge difference, because people look at you as not like just another person who wrote a book and maybe the neighbors read. Now they're like, for you to be a best-selling author, you must have gone somewhere and people must have really appreciated it. Whatever the metrics that they use, it really met those metrics, right? So it really puts me in a place of like, oh, I can hold my head up together with the rest of the best-selling authors. So I even changed my title saying, hey, not just an author, but a best-selling author. So I think that's very exciting. And I think even when I was trying to get somebody to read my book, to do an audio, they're like, put your status there. I'm like, okay, what are these? I said, I'm a best-selling author. They're like, really? I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? It's exciting. And I think it's a different place when you're a best-selling author. It just brings you one step higher from just being a regular author.
Excellent. I love it. I know I've had some of my other clients tell me that they got business, like clients, because of that, because of calling themselves a best-selling author. Have you experienced that?
Yes, I've got some good, leads from that, and just even leads from just the book. As I said, it creates credibility. People are like, "Wow, she wrote a book, so she knows what she's talking
Wonderful.
about." And thank God I do, because you've taught me, and I've really studied by myself a lot, so I can really get this material out in book and also when I'm talking to people.
Perfect. Okay, one last question for you, Carolyn. We called this particular webinar the Bestseller Secrets. And so if someone was thinking about writing a book, but they were on the fence, what advice would you give them to move forward?
So we talked about this today, and I think it's going to go back to two things, the attitude that they have and the actions. So if you do all the actions you want to do in the world, but you don't have a good attitude, or you're not motivated, you're not committed, you're not really looking at the end goal, it's because you're going to get roadblocks. You can't go past that. So you need both. You need to be in a very good space mentally, a really good mental attitude to be able to write a book. And also, besides that, take action. There's a lot of moving pieces that come. But as we spoke, my biggest thing is just being in that space and believing, and having faith to move on. But action and attitude, I think, is the most important thing for you to be able to be a successful author.
So true. All right. Well, you summed it up perfectly, Carolyn. I really appreciate you. Love your book. Love you. I want everyone to make sure they get themselves a copy of Split Second Success. Go on Amazon.com right after this webinar. Don't do it now, because we want you to stay here, because we got a lot more great stuff coming your way. But definitely go get yourself a copy of this book. You'll be really happy that you did. And I really appreciate you, Carolyn. And thank you so much for joining us today. All right, everyone, we've just heard from a best-selling author. Carolyn is a graduate of my program, the Book Writers Program. I've worked with her, very, very blessed to work with her in a personal, private mentoring capacity. So I kind of know her really, really well. And as she shared with you, she'd come to my home, we did a full day planning together. And I absolutely knew that she had a book in her, and not just one book. I know she has more, and there'll be more to come in the future. And she's got so much wisdom wrapped up in. And what she did, what really separates her from the rest, is she felt that confidence enough to go and take action and to do it and to follow through and to find the right guidance and to implement it. And that's where you get to reap the rewards. And it's not that complicated. We're not building rocket ships to the moon here. We're really just elevating our lives and our careers, and it can certainly help increase and elevate your life and your career, as we've heard personally from Carolyn right here, right now. So thank you so much. I'm so excited that she was here to join us. And I mean, just the willingness, you know, that's a big part of being successful. When we look at what does it take to succeed, you've got to be willing to share. You've got to be willing to give. You've got to be, you know, a constant giver. You got to be thinking about how can I bring more value to the world, or how will I bring more value to the world? And one of the ways is through your talent and your work. And so our next guest that we're going to bring on, and we're going to have him share some of his stories. And obviously it's for the purpose of sharing a lesson with you and to inspire you to take some action today as well. Everyone that's watching this webinar, this particular gentleman I met in May of 2014. And I was speaking at a conference in Dallas, Texas, and he happened to be there. And he had an extraordinary story. And I'm not going to share too much about it. I want to go back in time. I want to go back in time to how this idea originated in this author's mind. So Mick Peterson, I want to welcome you to the call.
Hi, Peggy. Hi, Carolyn. And hi, everybody else.
All right, great. You know, Mick, we got on the call a little early, and I know you're not at your home. You're visiting someone in San Francisco area, and I noticed you've got Psycho behind your head.
You want me to turn it?
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe that's not a good message, you know,
is that
for
better?
people to see.
Right. Do you want me to turn my shirt around too? For those people that aren't Yankee fans.
Yeah, well, I'm a Toronto Blue Jays fan. Yeah, could you take that shirt off?
No.
This could make this webinar a whole lot more interesting. So, you know, Mick, what was funny is today, you know, the lovely Rachel Bazzi, who we both love, and she's also a client of mine, someone that I've been blessed to work with, and she's working on her book right now, and it's a book called Courage. She gave me this rock actually recently when she was here, and she interviewed you and did a story about you, and I was reading it just this morning. And it was so fun to read that, to hear about what was going on in your life in 2008. And if you don't mind, let's go back in time to there so we can help people understand what was going on for you in your life and when exactly were you inspired to take action to write your book.
So I'm going to go back a little bit farther. In 2006, I got a copy of The Secret, you know, that came out and it went everywhere, the book The Secret. Watched the movie, and I realized I needed to change my life. That completely, just the concept of it, started the ball rolling. And then fast forward to September 13th, 2008, my job, my job, is a flight attendant. So I was doing a trip and I landed in Mexico City, and I was told I was at a really bad place in my life. It was very difficult. Financially, with relationships, with just every part of it was tough. So I was flying like crazy. And I remember landing in Mexico City, finding out that the plane was grounded because of a hurricane. And I said to the guy that told me to get my stuff, I said, no, we have to go back because there's a hurricane. He said, that's why the plane's grounded, because of the hurricane. And I lived in Galveston. Galveston is an island off the coast of Texas, not far from Houston. And I had a whole bunch of rental property there, and I didn't have any tenants. And I just finished the renovations of it, and it was time for me to get the tenants in there. And then now the hurricane's coming. So it was 2 years of toil and struggle to get to the place I was at, to then see a light at the end of the tunnel. And then this hurricane came in and it devastated everything. I had 4 feet of water in my apartments, and it was hard. And I remember I laid down that night when I was in Mexico City. I'd been crying, and I wrote in my journal, all is lost. And I do have a tendency for the melodramatic, but I really felt that way. And I thought, just in the dark, I thought, there's got to be something better. What would I like to do? And I don't know why I asked myself that. And that night, I was awoken in the middle of the night by this dream. It just came up. And the dream was the introduction to the concept of my book series. And so I thought about it nonstop as I rebuilt my life. And then in November of 2011, I sat down, I committed to complete the book, get it all out of my head onto the paper in 30 days. I just said I was going to do that. And I didn't understand all this stuff about the importance of energy back of something. But I got up every morning and I thought, I'm the next J.K. Rowling and I'm writing the next Harry Potter. And I would say that to whomever was in my environment. And people would look at me like I was a weirdo. But there were people that at first thought, okay, whatever. Day 10, day 12, you go, JK. By the end, they had caught this excitement that I would say, and I kept believing it. Well, what I was doing, unbeknownst to me, was I was infusing within the fabric of this story this energy. So I finished the book, had no idea what to do. I did a writing workshop, I did an editing workshop, but I didn't know. And then I met you. And honestly, it was the next right thing in the process of that dream coming true. And you never doubted me for one moment. You believed my vision. And that's something that I think is incredibly important, because at that point, I could let go of my lack of belief in myself or the self-doubt, all that. And I just hung my hat on your belief. And that's so important, to have a mentor that will do that. And you have never wavered in your belief in this. And there has been a couple times when you kind of went, psh, psh, Mick, no, come on. It's already done. Get that through your head.
That was only when you were entertaining negativity or doubts.
Exactly. And so that's something I think is very important for everyone out there to know, is that you have to believe in this process. And if you don't, or if there is the little voice, and if you're human, there are those voices, you have to hold on to somebody else's belief. And because you've studied this material for so long, you understand it completely, that it's up here first, and then it comes out here. So fast forward, I signed up with you, and you became my mentor. I did everything you said. One advantage, I grew up as a gymnast. I'm very coachable. If you tell me to do something, I do it, because when I was doing flips in the air, if I didn't do it, I would break my neck. So I made sure that I was coachable with you. So whatever you did, I recognize that. So April 28th, 2015, my book, let's see, can you see it?
There we go.
I don't have the book.
Stella and the Timekeepers.
I launched that to international bestseller status on Amazon. I was so excited about that happened. I was jumping up and down, and it was great. Well, the final thing that I had done before my book was released, before I put my head on the pillow, and all the work that I did that you teach was going to be coming to fruition, I sent an email to Phil Goldfine, an Oscar and Emmy-winning producer that I'd met at a Bob Proctor event. And he got back to me and said, oh, send me an electronic version. I'd love to read it. That was that. Well, I'm celebrating, excited for, weeks after this. And I think it was 2 weeks after I get a phone call from Phil, and he was very excited. When can you come to Hollywood? And today, whenever. So
can I just ask you a question?
Yeah,
just for everyone that's listening. Okay, so Mick contacted Phil Goldfine. Phil Goldfine is a producer. He's in Hollywood and he produces movies. So your intention was, I mean, it's obvious, to have a movie made for Stella and the Timekeepers. That's what you were thinking, right? That's what initiated
Correct.
that first contact. And listen, guys, I'm just going to stop here for a moment here. As you're listening to Mick, I want you to really notice the things that he did as we're going through this. One of the things you heard a little while ago, and I want you to make note of this, like write this down. He asked himself a very, very important question. And I'm just going to modify his question slightly for you. But here's a question that I suggest you ask yourself. What would you love? What would you love? Really think about that question, because Mick was going through a very challenging time in his life. And, many people go through challenging times, and they may not be like, all is lost. It might be just, something going on, or a simple desire to improve your situation, to improve your financial income or something like that. But that is a great question to ask. And it's an amazing thing to focus on. Also, Mick was talking about how he had invested in The Secret, watching The Secret and those ideas. And he became a very avid student of the principles of positive thinking, the principles of success. And Carolyn has a phenomenal understanding of that as well. And, earlier, Carolyn and I were having a conversation. We're talking about attitude and action. Those two things are really key. And as you're hearing Carolyn's story and you're hearing Mick's story, both of those things are prevalent in their stories, in their examples, as it is in mine too. So thank you very much, Mick. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but I just wanted to point out those very valuable points that you've really covered off here.
So continuing with the story, so I went to Los Angeles, and it was at a time when you were there as well, and there were 4 of us that went to Universal Studios. I didn't know anything about Universal Studios. I just knew that it was Universal Studios. Everybody knows Universal Studios. And then we drove through gate number 2. Gate number 2 is like the big gate, and all the stars go through. We were kind of teasing each other as we were going through and laughing like, oh my gosh, this is so big and exciting. And we drive by the sound stages, and we drive to Phil's bungalow, and you dropped me off and you took off, and I was just alone with Phil and for hours. And he gave me this vision of what it is that he saw for the possibilities here. And what I did again was I didn't question it. I just believed in his vision, and I held on to that vision. And I learned from you, Peggy, about goals. And so before I left that day, I said, hey, Phil, let's have a shared goal. And he goes, that's a great idea. So we wrote down a goal. We came up with a goal. We have a shared goal together. And it was very exciting time in my life. And he also said, hold the vision. It could take a decade. But if you're willing to keep that vision in your mind and keep taking the appropriate steps of action, then this is already done. But you have to keep doing those things. So then I got a book deal. It was after this. Phil happened to be somewhere, met the publishers of none other than the book The Secret. And they flew down to Universal Studios, where I'd moved to Los Angeles, and I was going to Universal Studios really just to be in front of Phil and be, I didn't want him to forget me. And I got Phil time. Sometimes it'd be 5, I call it Phil time, 5 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes. And then when Richard Cohen came, he fell in love with the idea of this. And so we signed, last year on my birthday, we signed the book deal. And then I went into this whole realm. I had no idea how it all works. Now, Peggy, you've done that. You've worked with publishing houses, so you understand that. But I had no idea how much goes into it when you're talking about an executive editor, a production editor, a developmental editor, a line editor, a copy editor. I mean, all of this stuff. So the writing process, when someone sits down to write the book, okay, that's great. But then when you get to leverage the knowledge of these people that are professional in the arena, it takes it to another level. It's wonderful.
You know, and I want everyone to understand, while you're listening to this, Mick's not talking about a different book. He's talking about Stella and the Timekeeper. So the contract that Mick has received from the publisher is the exact same publisher that published the book called The Secret, which is the same movie that he had watched way back when. That's his publisher. That's published one of the biggest books of all times. And they're publishing his book, and he's done a rewrite of it, and it's going to be released in a number of months, and will have a different name. And just like I shared with you earlier, Be a Dog with a Bone was a book that I had originally published. Now, we didn't change the name much. It was called On Being a Dog with a Bone, now called Be a Dog with a Bone. But as you're listening to this, and you're listening to Mick share his story, I want him to share with you in a minute one of the lines that Phil had said to him when they were standing in Hollywood, when they're standing at Universal Studios, and he said something to Mick. It was a welcome message, and I want him to share that. But also, here's what I want you to understand. Everyone that's watching this is really important. When you're getting these things happening in your life, where Phil Goldfine's inviting you to Universal Studios, when you're getting contracts with major publishers, when you're getting your books translated into multiple languages, when you're earning the kind of money that you like to be earning, it's not happening by accident. It's happening on purpose. And Mick is somebody who has a very clear vision and a goal that he set for himself. And even though Phil Goldfine had said to him, it may take 10 years, it may take 10 years, it may take 1 year, It may take a year and a half. When Mark Victor Hansen released Chicken Soup for the Soul, he set a goal. And the goal was to sell 1.5 million in a year and a half. And he used to say that because it kind of rhymed, right? I'm going to sell 1.5 million books in a year and a half. And a lot of people didn't believe him, just like Mick's talking about. Like, people, not everyone's going to believe you. And you may get people that are supportive, and you may get people who are non-supportive, but it doesn't matter as long as you hold on to your vision. So Mick, there was a point in time where you went over to Phil took you over to the executive dining room at Universal Studios, and you went over to see the Harry Potter theme park. And Phil turned to you and said something. Do you remember what he said? Welcome to...
Yes, I do remember. It's a changing point in my life. He was talking about, while we were having lunch, about a 4-quadrant project. And I didn't know what that was. And he says, it's the holy grail of movie making. It means that all 4 demographics, boys, girls, men, and women, are going to be attracted to this movie. He said, it's as if, he said, in 25 years and 200 films, I've never had a 4-quadrant project. They're very rare. He said, it's like someone dropped Wizard of Oz or E.T. or Star Wars or Harry Potter on my desk. And then he said, look around. So I'm in the executive dining room and I'm thinking, oh, what is Sandra Bullock here? So I don't know. So I look around and I don't know what I'm supposed to look for. And he said, welcome to Hollywood royalty. I'm making you the next J.K. Rowling. And when I heard that, I was like,
I got goosebumps.
It was so interesting, because that's what I would say every day when I sat down to write. So I want people to understand, I'm not trying to say this to you to impress you, but to impress upon you that we are the creators of our destiny. We are the ones that choose where we're going and what we're doing. So think big. And if you think that your vision is big, think bigger, because you can have that. We live in an abundant universe. So just think big. So now I've got, you said something one time to me, 5% of your job is done once you've finished your book. The other part is the marketing. And a lot of what I have been focusing my attention on, I got the book released, made it a bestseller. I followed everything you said. And then when Phil reached out to me, I thought, okay, my intentions here are to continue to put the right team players in place. So then the publisher, I attracted the publisher. How that went, it doesn't matter. I only have to focus on the what. You've taught me that. So I have the vision very clear, and then the publisher of one of the best-selling books of all time that just happened to change my life shows up. And then recently, this last week, I went to Universal Studios and I brought another piece into this, and it was a social media management company that's doing gangbusters in advertising in the world. Attracted them. It seems so natural the way it all kind of comes about.
That's it.
It's wonderful.
It is wonderful. And the thing is, when you're, and everyone watching this, I want you to think about what it is that you would love. I want you to really connect to that. Whether it is a book as an international bestseller, maybe it's just to get your book done, or maybe you'd like to get on the New York Times bestseller list so that you can own that credential forever. Perhaps you want to write a book that's going to be made into a movie and become a trilogy and become a franchise that's bigger than Harry Potter, $1 billion franchise. It really doesn't matter. You get to choose. One of the greatest gifts we've ever been given is this gift to choose. You know, we can live our life doing things that we absolutely deeply love. And I'm evidence of that. Like, I live an incredible life, an extraordinary life, doing work that I love. I'm surrounded here, by all these books that I produced. And I never thought, when I was 20 years of age, that one day I'd become this successful entrepreneur running a multi-million-dollar revenue producing business. That was something that wasn't even the realm of possibilities until I started to really get serious about the study and get serious about bringing something of value to another, and recognize that it's in that experience of making decisions. It's in that experience of committing to success. It's in that experience of taking action consistently. It's in that experience of getting up when you've fallen down. That's when you really, really, truly win. So this has been an extraordinary ride for you, Mick. I know you've already achieved several levels of success and layers of success, and there's so much more to come. But I want to talk about you just for a moment, just talk about you personally. How has this experience benefited you? How have you grown? What has really happened for you personally?
I understand that I can have anything I want. It's one thing to hear that, but it's another thing to believe it. And I believe it, and I want everyone to understand that. One thing that is really important for me for you to understand is that I was really excited about just having a book. And I don't want it to sound like, say, just having a book. Even before it was a bestseller, I had it shipped. I was going to be in Los Angeles for this event I think Phil was going to be at this event. It was a Bob Proctor event, and I had them shipped. I'd never seen them, and they showed up, and I was like, oh my God, I hugged it. It was like a baby, and it felt so good. It hadn't been released yet. In fact, one chapter was not even in that book. And I mean, there were all these weird little things that happened, but it was physical. So I took it from this concept, and then now I could touch it, and I could hand it to someone, they could read it. That was such a cool thing. So you think everything happens twice. You think it, and then you do it. So you've got to do the blueprint up here. So everything happens from the inside out.
So true.
And that's what I've learned from this whole process, is I've shifted living from the outside in and living from the inside out, that I get to decide. It's such a life-changing idea.
It really is. It's so true. I really appreciate you, and thank you so much for that. You know, the other thing that occurs, and Mick has been experiencing this, and Carolyn has been experiencing this, and I have been experiencing this, is that when you become an author, it's a fascinating world to be in that you tend to attract the most wonderful people who want to support you. You know, I came from an industry, like if we go back years and years ago when I was working in the corporate world and I had a job, as Mick had mentioned earlier, I was in an industry that was considered competitive. It was the technology industry, and it was considered competitive. And you wouldn't even think of talking to somebody who worked for IBM if you were an employee of Toshiba, as an example. And I was an employee of Toshiba at the time, because they were like the enemy, right? I mean, it really wasn't that bad, but people really kept to themselves. You know, there's an expression like they hold their cards close to themselves, and for whatever reason, you know, maybe thinking trade secrets would get out or something like that, or they would give them an advantage that would influence the industry to some degree. It's not like that being an author. And what is wonderful about being an author is that when you become an author, and this was a pleasant surprise for me, and I suspect it probably was for Carolyn and for Mick too. Yeah, Carolyn's nodding her head, and Mick too, is that when you become an author, you'll meet other people that may or may not be authors. They may not be authors, but they want to help you. They want to support you. I find that just having a dream that you are pursuing invites other people to want to get on board and help you and support you. And especially if it's a big dream. And I think sometimes people are afraid to share their dreams because they think people are going to ridicule them, or they're going to criticize them, or somehow they're going to put the fire out on their burning desire. And it's not, actually the opposite occurs when you share your dream. You'll find that a lot more people are supportive, and they'll say things like, I wish I had have done that, or I would love to do that, but never done it. Well, it's never too late. Now is the time. I mean, Carolyn and Mick are enjoying the reaps of their rewards, or the rewards that they're experiencing from their investment. They've invested in themselves. They've invested in their book. They've invested in the knowledge. They've invested in the understanding. They took the time. They put in the effort, and they've achieved these extraordinary results. So anyone watching this, if you have a desire to create results that are similar, perhaps beyond, or the same, whatever book you're thinking about writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. I actually took a copy off my grandson's bookshelf this morning of a book called on the Night You Were Born. Do you remember this book, Mick?
So sweet.
It really is. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. This book was sent to me from the author, Nancy Tillman, and I worked with her a number of years ago. And the book she actually had autographed to my son, Michelle. So Michelle was a little guy, actually, when she sent this to me. And Michelle's 25 now, so I don't think he's reading children's books, but he has a son, so he can read this book to James. And it said, to Michelle, you are the one and only ever you, from Nancy Tillman. And, you know, Nancy's story is a remarkable story as well, and in that she had a desire to create these children's books. And they're beautifully
lost your sound, Peggy.
Oh, did we lose my sound? You lost my sound. Carolyn, you can't hear me?
No, not at all.
Oh, wait, she can. Carolyn can hear me.
I'll tell you when.
Okay, let's check with the rest of the group. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me? I just want to make sure everyone else can hear me. It could be Mick.
Do you want me to talk?
No, no.
Oh, okay.
No. Everyone else can hear me. Mick, others can hear me. Okay, so let me just send him a message. Others can hear me. You are the only one. You are the one and only ever one. Okay, so you guys can hear me. Okay. All right. Hey, Mick, can you mute your line just for a second? I don't know if you don't mind, because we can hear you.
I got you back.
Oh, you got me back. Yay. Okay, good. Never lost sound, says Patrick. Thank you so much. Susan says I can hear you. Afu was here.
So sorry.
Afu, I have your business card on my desk right here. I called you this week. I sent you an email. Maybe you didn't get it. Anyways, I was trying to reach you. So back to, I see that Afu was on here. Back to this book. So Nancy had the desire to create this book, and she wrote the book and she illustrated the book. I just want to show you inside. Like, she did those illustrations, and they're beautifully done, like really, really incredibly well done. And she self-published this book. This is actually one of her original editions of a book that she self-published. She just created it. She created her own publishing house. This was from 2005, and self-published the book. And then she needed to learn how to market the book. So she took my program. And for those of you that are very serious about this and you want to invest in understanding what it takes to be a successful author, go to thebookwritersprogram.com and get yourself registered. And that's what Nancy did, just like Carolyn and Mick, they took action. And so Nancy got into my program, and she started to market her book and really started to get success and traction, started getting sales out there and people buying the books and people telling their friends about the book because they loved her book and buying more copies. And so this went on for months and months and months. And I was on the phone not that long after she had really implemented the marketing strategies that I taught her. And she had said to me that she was, you know, getting a little tired of packaging up these books and mailing them off. And I said, well, how many have you packaged up and sent off? You know, I was thinking, you know, maybe it's a few hundred or something like that. And she said, you know, she thought for a moment, and she said, I've now sold over 40,000 copies. And I was like, what? 40,000 copies? That's a pretty big deal. You know, most books that are released will never sell more than 500 copies. And those are the people that are just not willing to learn what it takes to be a successful author. So that's the reality of what it's like out there in the world. But there's plenty of room for success. And so I said to her, I said, are you looking for a publisher? And she said, well, I wouldn't mind having one, but I know I have to get an agent first. I said, I'm going to introduce you to my agent. My agent's going to want to take you on. She's going to love you. And so I did. I introduced Nancy to my agent, Kathy Hemming. Kathy Hemming signed on Nancy. Within a few months, she had a $250,000 advance for Nancy Tillman. And I got an email from Kathy recently to say that this book alone, and Nancy's written many, many books now, but this book alone has now sold over 5 million copies, over 5 million copies of that book, On the Night You Were Born. And I mean, I could sit here for hours sharing with you success story after success story of my own books, my authors' books, my clients' books, of authors who have taken the course and achieved results. But ultimately, what does it really come down to? It comes down to two things. As Carolyn said to you earlier, it comes down to your attitude and your action. And it's not just any action. I think that's where some confusion comes from, is a lot of people think, well, you know, I'll just get it in bookstores. That doesn't work unless you're driving huge amounts of traffic into the bookstores. Your book's just going to get sent back to you, because bookstores are consignment shops. What does that mean? That means you don't get paid unless people are buying your books, and people aren't buying your books unless you're promoting your books. It is the author's responsibility to market their books. And so, I absolutely recommend, if you're going to invest the time and the energy to produce your book, as Carolyn did with Split Second Success, as I've done with all of my books, as Mick did with his book, you also want to invest in really learning what's required to market your books as well. So that would be my absolute highest recommendation for everyone who's on this call right here, right now. So head on over to thebook.writersprogram.com. Even if you've written your book already, doesn't matter, because I go into all the marketing strategies, publicity, easy for you to say, publicity secrets, and also revenue generating. And I mean, we haven't even touched on revenue generating ideas and the multiple ways that you can generate revenue. And we're talking about significant revenue. I have some authors who implemented one idea. I have one author that I was working with, a lovely woman, and she took my program and launched a coaching offer. And she did that relatively soon after she'd taken the program, and generated $113,000 in revenue. And I've had people that I know do webinars, and in an hour do $284,000 in a webinar. Or people go on to do programs and weekend events and membership sites and other offerings like online summits and things like that, and generate multi millions of dollars. And they aren't typical results, because that's, you know, the way it is in the world. But I'll tell you, that opportunity, as I talked about earlier in the call, is available to absolutely everyone. Just like back in the 1800s, where people were getting their picks and their shovels and they're heading on out to California to mine for gold. You don't even have to go to California. You could be in California like Nick is right now, or you could be in the comfort of your home, wherever you happen to be in the world, and you can create success. Either success as an author, infopreneur, or entrepreneur, whatever it is that you want to do. Or maybe you simply want to, you know, write a book and get it out there and leave a legacy. I had a couple lovely ladies that were in my event yesterday, and they've decided that they're going to invest. They just signed up for the program yesterday, and they're actually going to launch their father's book. And their father has passed on, but he wrote this book, and they want to breathe life into this book and really bring back, you know, their and respect their father and honor his memory of his talent and his incredible gift that he left on the world, which was the book that he wrote, which was a fiction book. So what I teach with authors is I teach them how to promote any kind of book. So as you've seen, I've got fiction, nonfiction, different types of books. If your book has an audience, or there's a potential audience for your book, I can definitely help you. So those of you that are serious and you're committed and you want to work together, well, I'd love to work with you. You can just head on over to the Book Writers Program. And if you are wanting, like Carolyn had mentioned earlier, that she's a private mentoring client of mine, and we've been working together now for a year. And she was saying to me today that she's not the same woman today that she was a year ago. And I'm not taking any credit for that. That was all her, absolutely her. And as you've seen, she's a woman who knows how to take charge and make decisions and take action. Just like Mick Peterson. I got to know Mick Peterson in 2014. And what I love and appreciated about Mick, in addition to his wonderful personality and who he is in his heart, but I love that he's constantly staying focused on his goal. He's investing in himself. He's really serious about this, to the point that he's dedicated and disciplined to really learning and expanding and growing, and very open to new ideas. And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that Mick Peterson will be our next J.K. Rowling. And you can say that you saw him right here today on this call. So we're going to call it a wrap for now. So for those of you that have been on the call, it's been my pleasure to serve you, to be here with you, to share in these success stories. I hope to some degree these examples or ideas have inspired you, more importantly, to take action so that you're living your dream as well, so that you're fulfilling your lifelong dreams, and that you're really following and leaving a legacy for others to enjoy and benefit from, as you can benefit from as well. So thank you so much for being here, everyone. Thank you, Mick. I really appreciate you. as we've been on the call, Mick, I don't know if you know this or not, but I've got a little chat box going here, and there's been a lot of comments and a lot of people giving credit to you and what you've been doing. They're very happy for you as well. And so it's really great. Okay, so sweet. Yeah, it's really, really sweet. So thank you so much. So thank you all for being here. Really appreciate you guys. We're going to call it a wrap. And we'll see you in the next webinar, or we'll see you in the program. Get yourself registered right now, thebookrawritersprogram.com. All right. Thank you, Mick. Thank you, Carolyn. All right. Bye, everyone. Bye.